Over the last 3 decades of advising millionaires, I have literally earned a PhD in the trenches of seeing what works and how to create a secure financial future, as well as what those who have amazing lives do differently than others. I have witnessed so many stories and even seen some firsthand of what happens when people make amazing financial decisions and when people don't. From not having enough money to the constant fear of running out of money. For too many people, the golden years turn out to be miserable years. I built my career working in specific niches, specifically with different sectors of millionaires. And I typically do not work with family and friends, largely in part because I just don't want it to feel like I'm out with people and the topic always gets over to finances. In some situations, especially some that recently I've witnessed, I do have to wonder if I would have shed some of my insight, if it would have changed the trajectory of some of these people's lives. I've had some sleepless nights and even guilt thinking that, I really probably should have done more to just provide insight to the people that I care about and I want to have a bright financial future. And so I just decided I was going to do a podcast, some of the millionaire advice and insight I've learned over the course of my career and share it not only with my family and friends, but also to many of you who are loyal followers. And I really appreciate your loyalty and I love that you love the insight you're getting. The best outcome of today's episode is that you go through and you check all the boxes and you're like, my finances are in order. I mean, we'll both be cheering. If that's the case, great. Just go ahead and share this with a family or friend who could use it. If it's not the case, I just encourage you to listen, take notes, identify which items you need to address, and then just prioritize them. Start with the first, then the second, then the third. You'll be so glad you did. So let's dive in. Hi, I'm Annette Bau, host of the Wealth Inside and Out podcast and founder of the Millionaire Insider. My mission is to help you simplify the money game so you can create a financially secure and fulfilled life without having to have a PhD or spend countless hours on your finances. You're going to learn how to think like a millionaire, stop worrying about money and wondering if your financial house is truly in order, and instead spend your time doing what you love. With over 3 decades advising 7, 8, and even 9-figure millionaires, and now joining that elite group, I'm in a unique position to help you make the best financial choices so you can create a secure financial future and retirement you love. This is the Wealth Inside and Out podcast. You can access our free financial checkup at themillionaireinsider.com/FC. Most people understand the importance of a medical checkup. They get them annually or semi-annual. Well, the same thing is important when it comes to a financial checkup. And the best step to secure your financial future so you can have a golden retirement is by doing a checkup. And again, you can go to themillionaireinsider.com/FC. Our free resource today is our Millionaire Mindset Guide. To access it, you can go to themillionaireinsider.com/MMG. Thinking like a millionaire is so helpful in achieving your financial goals. This guide provides insight from over 3 decades of my insight, my research, and my advising multimillionaires on how they think, what they do, and why they are successful. This insight contains over 40 years of research, including 35 of those years I have spent advising millionaires. So again, you can go to themillionaireinsider.com/MMG. MillionaireSeries.com copyrights all materials and intellectual property. This information is for educational purposes only. It is not intended to replace any advisor or specialist or to provide any investment, financial, tax, retirement, or healthcare advice. By accessing this content, you agree to hold MillionaireSeries.com and its affiliates harmless. For today's resources and show notes, you can go to themillionaireinsider.com/73. So today we're diving into millionaire advice and insight I've learned over the last 3 decades. Next week, we're going to dive into episode 74, themillionaireinsider.com/74, and I'll link to it in the show notes, when family and friends overspend. Because a lot of times people end up having problems, especially women who have children that are spendthrifts their partner or their spouse that dies might have been good at saying no to the kids, or the kids knew not to ask. But once they have the parent who says yes more often, they take advantage of it. And so we're going to talk about what you can do to really set those boundaries and make sure that you are following your plan and you're also not enabling their addiction. One of the things that's known by research is that people who overspend, overdrink, overeat, it's their primal brain, it's their amygdala. They've got to get their primal brain and their prefrontal cortex in alignment. Until they do, it can be really hard. And what you'll find is that if they don't rewire their brain, what the latest research shows is that they'll go from overdrinking to an overspending. They just replace it with a different behavior. They'll go from gambling to overdrinking. It's so interesting. So we've got to look at the root cause, and sometimes that requires a rewiring of the brain. Now, if a person wants to change a habit or a neural pathway, it takes on average 66 days, between 18 and 254. So it can be done, but the person has to want to change. And if you have somebody enabling them, a lot of times they don't. We're going to dive into that next week. Let's dive in now to the Millionaire advice and insight that you can start applying, either you or you can share it with family and friends or your kids. The first thing I want to cover, bigger picture. And this has taken me years to really figure out, and it's because maybe I didn't want to get it initially. The most important thing, people say money doesn't matter. Well, we'll get into that in a minute. The reality of it is the goal is to live fulfilled and for you to determine what that means. For me, living fulfilled is being able to spend time with my family and my friends, being able to have space where I don't have to do anything. We all have to get clear on that. Being really healthy, really taking care of my health, all of those things. For you, it may look different, and that's fine. The key, though, is to determine what that means for you. Because what I have seen, and I have seen millionaires that have amazing lives, and I have seen millionaires that have miserable lives. But what I have found is that the ones that have amazing lives are living fulfilled on their terms. Now, a lot of times people say, well, Annette, money won't bring you happiness. That's true, but neither does poverty. And I will also say, having grown up without any money and experienced what that's like to now having more money than I could have ever imagined or probably ever spend, it gives you freedom. It gives you choices. That's why you have money, plain and simple. So you can choose what you do. You can choose how to spend your time. You can choose to work or not work, all of those things. That's what money brings you. A life with money is so much better than one without it. And so you got to have that balance, and you've got to know what fulfilled looks like to you. Most people, if they were in my situation, would not be working. I love working. I change people's lives. And so I'm continuing to work. As long as it's fun, I'll continue to work. But I think a lot of people think the goal is just to get to that destination and then quit. And if you're not enjoying what you're doing, then you should. But if you're really doing what you love, you get to the point where you have more money than you could spend, and it just becomes fun, and you see the impact you're making, and it just all comes together. So again, it's not for me to judge. It's not for anyone to judge. It's for you to determine what that looks like for you. Number 2 is completing and updating your estate plan. Now, it kind of goes without saying, but I just want to really reiterate this, is that it's critical that you do a financial plan, and that's going to look at your spending, your insurance, your taxes, your retirement, literally every aspect of your financial life. But I want to focus in right now on estate planning, because that's an area I see so many problems. And one of the biggest challenges I've seen over my career, and I continue to see it to this day, is that people don't understand what it means to do an estate plan, and that includes titling assets correctly and properly naming beneficiaries. People share they're so excited they've completed their estate plan. And occasionally I'll say, oh, that's so good. That's great. Now, have you coordinated all your assets? And they look at me like I'm talking Greek. Like, well, what do you mean? And I go, well, you complete your estate plan, like your trust, your durable power of attorney, your medical power of attorney, your living will, your burial plan, all those things. And then you have to make sure that the title is correct and that the beneficiaries are correct. Most things don't pass via your estate plan. Some things do, but a lot of things don't. And so if it has a title or a beneficiary designation, you got to make sure that those coordinate with your estate plan. It all depends on if you're married. It depends on how your assets are going to flow. Should you leave a qualified account to your spouse? Should you leave it to your trust? Who should you name as contingent beneficiary? All those things have to be looked at. And it all really depends on what your goals are and the situation, if your partner can handle money, if they're a spendthrift, all of those things. But those things need to be looked at. And what I find a lot of times happens is that people are so excited that they've gotten their estate plan done and then they don't have their assets titled correctly. And I will also share this, is that because we do a lot of work with it where people have not done it correctly. Doing it correctly before you die costs you about a third of what it costs you if you wait. It's so expensive. And some of the attorneys I work with and some of the ones that I know professionally do a lot of probates because people just never get around to retitling their assets. And sometimes they don't want to have to pay the attorney. Bottom line is, if you're going to do an estate plan, you got to make sure that everything is coordinated so that your wishes come to fruition. I've had a situation where literally one of the people that I knew got all of the life insurance because he got his mom to change the beneficiaries. And she thought her estate plan was going to cover that. And it didn't. He got all the life insurance and none of the other kids got any of that. And it literally caused so much tension in that family because it wasn't what she wanted. And it really shouldn't have happened. It was just a nightmare. And I just remember thinking, boy, that could have been avoided just by having a plan, making sure everything's coordinated, making sure you're working with somebody who knows what they're doing. Step number one, you got to complete your estate plan. And number two, you got to fund it. And it should always be updated. It should be current. The vast majority of people are going to have a trust combined with medical power of attorney, financial power of attorney, a living will, a burial plan. They'll have a pour-over will in the event they have assets that don't get into the trust and are not passing via title or beneficiary. And then if you have minor children, a conservator. Now, you may not have minor children, but you may have minor grandchildren. So it's absolutely imperative that you make sure your kids have named somebody in their estate docs that states who will take care of those minor children, whether you would or wouldn't, meaning maybe you're like, oh my goodness, I do not want that responsibility. Well, that's important to let your kids know so they can pick somebody that would. Or you might say, absolutely. I mean, there's not a right or a wrong. You just have to figure out what works. I just remember early in my career, there was a situation in Florida where parents died and they had not had an estate plan. They didn't have a conservatorship. Both grandparents were fighting to get those grandkids. And the court ended up placing them in a foster care. And I think it was like they were so concerned about the safety of those kids because the grandparents were out of control, both sides wanted them. And I remember reading this article, and the judge said, if your kids were so concerned that you got their kids, they should have set up an estate plan. So don't let that be you. And then one of the things that can also be helpful that we have in our estate plan is a trust protector. And that just makes sure that the trustees are doing what they're supposed to do. I have seen cases where kids get trusts where they're not supposed to get money, and they go in there and they just start raiding the trust. If there's not somebody there to oversee it, especially if they're the trustees, it can be just disastrous because then they end up being broke, don't have any money, and now they're living a miserable retirement. Just something to be aware of. If you need a checklist for your estate plan, you can go to themillionaireinsider.com/EPC and download our estate planning checklist. All right, number 3, you want to set up a goal of replacing your paycheck or income. Now, this morning, after I had already completed this outline, I was talking to one of my besties, and she shared how last night she had been at a company event, and she started talking with a woman there who was like one of the executives. She was 69 years old, and she had shared that her biggest mistake was she had never made a plan to replace her paycheck. She travels extensively and works numerous hours every day. She said it was just terrible because she did not have a plan to replace that. And so she was forced to continue to work. Now, you may love what you do like I do. Work is fun, but it's fun because I have a choice. It's fun because I get to choose who I work with. It's fun because if I don't like somebody, I don't have to work with them. That's what money does. It gives you choices of what you do, who you spend time with. The other thing you got to be aware of is a few decades ago, companies were funding pensions. So it wasn't a real big deal when you retired because you had your pension and Social Security, and most people were okay. They might not have been wealthy, but they could get by. Well, employers figured it out. It was a lot more profitable to put the burden of retirement on their employees. Welcome 401k, right? And it's so funny. Everyone's like, oh, I have a 401k. And I mean, most people just don't realize that's just simply shifting the burden of retirement from the company to the employee. And if you think about it, companies, if they're generous, are matching up to 6% of what an employee funds in their plan. It's not even close to the amount they were funding in a pension. And so it creates a huge gap between what you're earning and what you're going to have in retirement. And it puts the burden of wealth building on you so that you can retire one day in a lifestyle you desire. And I'll just say, if you haven't started planning or you don't have enough money, do what you can. You want to have enough money so you're not worrying about when you're going to run out of it. The best plans I've seen over my career are ones that are a combination of guaranteed income and growth. And obviously, it all depends on a person's risk tolerance, age, objectives to determine the right mix. A combination of those two, in my opinion, are ideal. So many people have shared with me over the years that when they're 70 or 80, they won't want to spend money. And it's so interesting. When you're in your 30s or 40s, I can kind of get that. But after 35 years of advising super wealthy people and having clients now in their 90s, I have not found that to be the case. What I find is that the new generation of retirees are not sitting on their rocking chair. They're traveling, playing golf, attending retreats, visiting family and friends, and spending time doing the things they couldn't do when they were working. Now, we're going to talk about the solution here in number 4, but you got to have a plan to replace that income. I also have found that people that have a plan in place that replace their income and they have that guaranteed income, they live longer. I mean, I kid you not. I had one client and she shared, I could share this. But when I first started working with her, she was already like 10 or 15 years over the date the doctors thought she was not going to live past. And she ended up living another 15 years. And I laughed because the one thing she did not have stress on was money because she had guaranteed income. And it was perfect for her because she had a tendency of being a little bit of a spendthrift. That's the power of it. All right, let's move to number 4. We're going to talk about creating a plan to avoid running out of money. And the reason I really want to discuss running out of money is I've heard so many people share how long they can live before they're going to run out of money. And many others have no idea, and they're just hoping and praying they're going to be okay. I mean, both are just terrifying. So many people have shared stories about relatives who don't have enough money or who are literally only living on Social Security, which an average of $1,600 a month. Studies show that up to 40% of people, that's their sole retirement income. My peers and I think it's even higher because there's people that they're not including in that have a really, really small amount of money, but it's so minuscule, it's questionable if it should be counted. In the study we did with the Millionaire Insider on women and money, we interviewed over 200 women, and the number one concern was running out of money. And it's literally an epidemic, and it's likely going to get worse. So many people aren't saving. And now with cost of goods being so expensive, we did have high inflation. Now that the cost of goods have come down, companies are not passing that on. And so those of us who have money and are in the stock market are totally benefiting because you see the performance that occurs. But the people who don't have money that's invested and that are just having to go buy gas and food are really struggling. And it's a serious problem. I just read a post by a connection on Facebook who shared that he can't retire. And there were over 200 likes and 60 comments and 22 shares, and almost everyone agreed with him. The other thing that I also discovered in our study was that a lot of people's plan was just to continue working. But then because they either became sick or became disabled, they were unable to. And I just cannot imagine being in retirement wondering if you're going to run out of money. There is just nothing fun about it. It's hard to believe we live in one of the wealthiest countries in the world and that yet we have such an at-risk population of people retiring broke. Hopefully, you still have time to do something about it if that is an issue with you, or if not, you can encourage your kids to. Because a lot of people end up having issues because they are supporting their children. So, again, you just got to look at all of that. Almost 75% of the people over age 65 living in poverty are women. And the frightening thing about that is they weren't broke or poor when they were married or working. 80% of couples with an older adult are currently at risk of running out of money or struggling financially. In another survey, 80% of the respondents shared that they were more afraid of running out of money than dying. And those things are just terrifying. If you choose to work at age 70 and you want to, that's great if you have the choice. It's just being forced to do it is pure misery. And I've just seen so many people that end up in that boat. And it's devastating. I share with you that there's a woman, she's got to be maybe 75. I would say 70, 75, 80. I mean, maybe she just looks older than she is. I see her in our neighborhood and she's got this old truck that looks like it's on its last leg. And she's there doing yard work. And I just think, I just can't imagine. I mean, if you're in your own yard and you want to do it, I get it. But having to do it at that age, she just looks so exhausted. And it's just sad, just plain sad. I know I spent a little time on this and some of you are probably getting anxiety from it. That's not my goal. My goal is to make you understand how serious it is. And maybe it's not impacting you, but maybe it's your kids. But it's such a serious issue. And the problem is that it's not a neutral sum game. It's a negative sum game. You know, you get to that point and you haven't made the right choices, you've got problems. And there's just really no backing out of it. So it's just something to be aware of. So some of the options that you can take to mitigate risk and to produce guaranteed income and replace your current active income, one is obviously Social Security. The other is a pension plan and another is an annuity. Now, there's other ones. We were just talking about it on our call with my financial transition certified advisors today. And there are some mutual funds. They're not guaranteed, but they do aim for a certain yield, like one's a 5%, one's a 7%. Even right now in high yield money markets, you can get 4 or 5%. So there are things you can do, but we're going to focus on these three for right now. Social Security, I know a lot of people are concerned it's going to go bankrupt. My advisor peers and I don't have a crystal ball, but we feel it's more likely that they're just going to reduce the payout, at least for the foreseeable future. But as I mentioned, studies show that up to 40% of people, that's their sole retirement income. And we think it's even higher because there's people that they're not including in that have a really, really small amount of money, but it's so minuscule. It's questionable if it should be counted. As I said earlier, the average check is $1,600 a month. Boy, I just can't even fathom living on $1,600 a month in retirement. The other thing you have to be aware of is that when the first spouse dies, assuming you're married, you've got joint Social Security, when the first spouse dies, the smaller of those two checks is going to go away. So you have the right to keep the larger one, which a lot of times it's going to be the husband just because he's worked longer and made more money. Not always, and that's changing. But in the past, that's been what it's been. The next option is a pension plan. Now, if you have one, you've got to consider yourself really lucky. My husband does. He's got one. And what's great about it is it's a joint option where he gets it for his life and then I get it. The majority of states, especially community property states, now require the spouse to sign off if they're not named as the beneficiary and joint annuitant. Unfortunately, it wasn't always that way. And I see so many people who do not have joint set up. And when their partner dies, they're terrified because their income is going to literally drop dramatically. Now, if you sign away, or your kids or your friends, your rights to a pension, it is imperative that you have a life insurance policy that you own and that will provide money to you if your partner predeceases you. But when you look at the numbers as far as how much money you would get for both of your lifetimes, it really makes sense. And I've never seen a situation where it's been more advantageous based on the big picture plan and making sure that both partners are going to be taken care of to take a single life. Now, you have to look at the numbers. You can't just say that, but you got to look at that. And if you do it, you got to make sure you've got some type of insurance coverage on the back end because they're going to need it to support themselves. All right, the third option in annuity is I'm just in love with it. Now, I just love lifetime income. Now, I also love the stock market, so don't get me wrong. But for most of us who've been invested in the stock market for 3 decades, we've made a lot of money. And if you've been paying attention to it recently, it's like, oh my gosh, this is why you don't have all the money in the stock market. I mean, I'm seeing stocks. Now, we have mostly stocks, which are very high risk. And I don't recommend stocks for anyone that doesn't have a significant portfolio. I mean, you have one stock dropping 15 to 20%. It's a wake-up call for all of us, regardless of how much money you have. Before beginning any investment plan, you've got to create an overall plan, a financial plan. And then you've got to look at your risk tolerance, your time horizon, your age, your goals, all of those things. It's imperative. And I really encourage you to sit down with an advisor. Now, if you need an advisor, you can go to themillionaireinsider.com/support-request. Whatever you do, you need to do something, and you just need to make sure everything's taken care of. I love the returns you can get from the stock market over time. It's high risk, and most women are like me, where I don't want to wake up and hope I have money or see I've lost money. I mean, to this day, it bothers me. I like it when I see, my account hitting an all-time high, which it just did a few weeks ago, and then it went down. Thankfully, not as much. And it's funny because right now I'm positioning more of my money, my husband and I are, both of us, into guaranteed income, because as we look at the horizon, and even though I'm not going to retire for a while and neither is he, as we look at when he has to start taking RMD and I do, there's products where if you start funding them now and they grow, by the time you start taking them out, they've increased dramatically and they're guaranteed. So what I like is you can't lose any of that money. And I just love knowing that we've got X amount of dollars guaranteed we can't lose money. Again, that may be right for you, it may not. It depends on your big picture. How much money do you get from Social Security? How much money do you have in a pension? How much money do you need for other things? You don't want to just jump into any product until you know your situation, and you want to make sure that you've looked at the bigger picture. So I just want to stress that. I'm giving you kind of my lowdown of what I'm doing, what I think, but I'm also giving you what I've seen work effectively with people that I have advised. And people that, a lot of them had pensions. Then as pensions went away, we needed a new solution. The one thing I want you to kind of get, and hopefully everyone understands this, but the stock market and real estate market, and for those of us who have been fortunate to invest in it over our lives, we have made, multiple 7 figures in that area. It's got more risk, and therefore it should have more return. Guaranteed income is all about protecting it and not losing money. And of course, it's going to have a lower return. I always find it fascinating where people are like, oh, it's the worst thing you could do because you have a lower return. Well, I get it. I just don't want the risk. I can lose money. My real estate could be one property could be worth $1 million, and next year it's worth 600 or 700. Or I could own, stocks, $1 million in stocks, and next year it drops by 20%. It's 800,000. With an annuity, especially if you do a guaranteed annuity, that doesn't happen. So you don't lose money even if the market's down. Now, you're never going to have the high of the market, but you don't lose money, meaning you can't lose any principal. That's what I like about it. Now, you could lose money depending on what inflation does, so you have to take that into account. But assuming you're diversified and you got that big picture plan, your stocks, meaning mutual funds or stocks, most of you probably are in mutual funds, but whether it's stocks or mutual funds, and your real estate should keep pace with inflation. So again, you got to look at that with your advisor, but it's important to know. Generally speaking, there's a place for both. How that allocation ends up working out is going to completely depend on your situation. Now, my husband and I have been at odds at this for several years. He's all about the stock market, and he trades on our account options, and he's really good at it. And even though I have a degree in finance and I was pretty good at options in my day, I do not have the interest or the time to deal with that. And I was always like, I want guaranteed income. I want guaranteed income. And what I find fascinating about it is now that we've had guaranteed income for literally a decade, now he's come around and he's like, yes, I like that. I think that was a really good move. Sometimes for you women that are listening, if you have a husband that's like, oh, no, we don't need any of this. I just want growth. At some point, they start realizing how nice it is to just every month have that paycheck. And, you don't have to do anything. It really does provide peace of mind and a lot less stress. The key, if you are purchasing an annuity, there are some things I feel really strongly about. Number one is you've got to be using an independent agent or advisor. They will, first of all, get all the details, and then they will have options of probably like 5 to 7 different options of carriers. And if you have an independent, they can pretty much offer you every company. If you have somebody that's only representing 1 or 2 companies, that's a problem. Now, interestingly, in applications now, they have to disclose that because there's been such a problem where people are just selling somebody an annuity and it's really not the best one. So you got to make sure that that is really important. The other thing is make sure you have really good ratings of the carrier, that you're looking at the financials so you know that they're going to be around. And ideally, there's some objectivity, meaning the best product for a person can literally change week to week. Like we had one situation where we have a person that is preparing for his retirement. And we talked about it. We did the numbers. We decided on one company. And then it wasn't for 3 weeks until he finally made a decision. And by the time we did that, it changed to a different carrier. So you just got to be on top of that. And if you don't have an advisor that is, you got to find one that is. And then number 5, you got to make health a priority. As the saying goes, health is wealth. And that includes mental and physical. Medical expenses are the number one reason people file bankruptcy. So you got to have really good insurance and then take care of yourself. You got to eat a clean diet, lean protein, organic, non-starchy vegetables, healthy fat. I encourage you to drink 50% of your body weight in ounces of water a day. Get plenty of sleep. The studies on sleep are indisputable. Pretty much agreed upon by almost every expert that sleep is critical. It's so critical to like even getting Alzheimer's, mental clarity, your health, everything. And ideally, you want to be to bed, ideally by 10. Some people even say 9, because if you look at your like circadian rhythm, it's really important that you are sleeping more based on light cycles. Also, REM starts producing at 9 until 2 a.m. So getting to bed early is a great thing, but making sure you're getting 8 hours of sleep is huge. You got to remember that you are awake, even though you might not notice it at night, for 30 to 90 minutes. So make sure that sleep is a priority. Like last night, I've been so busy. July was one of our busiest months in my entire career. That's why I'm in Phoenix and not up in my cabin. And it's, a sore subject. That's also a sore subject with my husband. Last night, I did not get to bed until midnight because I've got so much to do and I wasn't planning on going up north this weekend until I found out my son and his girlfriend are. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to sit down here working while my whole family's up at my other home. So I had to work late and I just can sense it. I try to get to bed. My goal is to get to bed, be in bed by 9:30 and then go to sleep around 10-ish. That's ideal. Doesn't always happen, but that's the goal. And then exercise, 10,000 steps a day as far as cardio, weight training 3 times a week, stretching. I do yoga every morning, daily, and then I go to a class. And I also think meditation and chants are also powerful. You got to see what works for you, but all those things are helpful for your mental and physical health. And a great reminder for me is Slowing Down to the Speed of Life. It's not only a great book, but it's a great reminder for all of us. Now, again, if you need have specific questions, you can go to themillionaireinsider.com/support-request. All right, number 6, funding your long-term care if you need it. The cost of funding long-term care is very expensive. Now, I can't guarantee this, but what I can also tell you, it's bizarre. Now, this is 35 years. My clients who did not purchase any type of long-term care insurance were the ones that ended up needing it. Now, there's no scientific study to it, but I think it's fascinating. And I'm like, oh my goodness. Now that could change over the years because I have a lot of clients that are in their 70s, 80s, and even 90s. And so that could change, but I find that really interesting. And I kind of wonder if gave them peace of mind, more peace of mind. Whether you purchase a long-term care insurance policy or you self-insure, you got to create a plan because the odds are you're going to need it. And I've witnessed so many situations and heard so many stories of people spending tens of thousands of dollars for long-term care. And I witnessed it last year, $200,000 later. It's just such a waste of money just laying there waiting for the person to die. It's just devastating. And fortunately, she had the money, but the point is that money could have gone to a much better use because she was never going to get better. And I could go on, right? I could give you so many different examples, but I just wanted to give you an overview on things that I have seen that have turned out not so great so that you can sit down, create a plan, and really make sure that your golden years and your future life is all you want it to be. You can go back through the episodes. You can go to themillionaireinsider.com/podcast and look at all the different episodes. We have so many different lessons, and a lot of them are questions that have come from our listeners. If you have a question you want to ask, you can go to themillionaireinsider.com/73 and then scroll down to the bottom and you'll see the show notes. And you'll see a link there that says ask a question. Just click on there and you can go in. And then I love doing questions that people ask because as long as it's something that's going to benefit everyone, which most of them do, I find that really helpful. So there you have it. Now, again, if you have questions, I went over a lot of material or you need help creating a plan, you can go to themillionaireinsider.com/support-request. So let's recap. The first thing you got to do is determine what living fulfilled means to you. That's the number one goal. Second, you got to create and then update your estate plan. Third, you got to have a plan to replace your paycheck and make sure you're in alignment, meaning the husband and the wife are in alignment. That is important. Men typically want to take more risk than us women. Not always, but generally. 4, you want to create a plan to avoid running out of money. And 5, make health a priority. Health is wealth. And then you want to figure out how you're going to fund your long-term care if you were to need it. Now, I don't think I covered on long-term care. Probably the best options, I think, are more of a hybrid plan. I'll link to in the show notes. I did an interview with one of our certified advisors, Oscar Alvarez. He's an expert on it. I personally really like hybrid plans over traditional just because traditional are so expensive. And most traditional plans, if you don't use it, you lose all the money. Whereas in a hybrid plan, if you don't use it, your heirs will either get a death benefit or you can use it as an annuity. So it gives you more flexibility. So now the key, my friends, is just do something. And I look so forward to not only seeing you on future podcasts and having you share this with your family and friends. I really appreciate that. But you're going to be so glad you took care of some of these things before it's too late. And if this isn't applicable to you, then give it to a friend or give it to your kids. They will ultimately be so happy you did. If you love the content of this podcast, please follow and subscribe to our channel so you get notified of episodes, and also give us a 5-star review and share a comment. We really appreciate it. Congratulations on taking another step to create a financially free life you love. If you're not sure about your financial future or that it's in order, or you are ready to stop worrying about money or possibly the fear of becoming a bag lady, ending up broke in retirement, or you simply are ready to know your financial house is in order so that you can have a bright financial future, please go to themillionaireinsider.com/NSF. And that doesn't stand for non-sufficient funds. It stands for next step finance. It's the next best step of what you need to do so you can avoid an NSF notice in your future. Again, themillionaireinsider.com/NSF. The number of women who were not broke or poor while working or married is staggering. The entire mission of the Wealth Inside and Out podcast is to ensure you have the information for you, your family, your friends, anyone who's willing to listen to it and apply it so that you can create a financially free life you love. Again, themillionaireinsider.com/NSF. Until our next episode, take one action that will help you create a financially free life you love. I'm Annette Ba'u, your host. All international copyrights are reserved. Bye for now.